Mike and Pafan, a love story. Written by Barron. Chapter 1. The Noise That Never Stopped. At 37 years old, I had built something most people dream about. The wrap shop in Los Angeles was doing $50,000 a month. 50,000 every single month. I'd grown it from nothing during the pandemic when I got laid off from my government contract. Started teaching courses on car wrapping. Launched a traditional marketing agency on the side. I was successful by every metric that mattered in my 20s and early 30s. But success sounds different when you're the one paying for it. The noise never stopped. It was the hum of the wrap machines, the constant ping of notifications, the mental arithmetic of payroll and client expectations and competition. It was the pressure of being a Black entrepreneur in a space that wasn't built for me. It was the grind that had become so normal, I couldn't hear it anymore. Except I could, and it was deafening. My stepdad taught me about work ethic. My biological dad and mom split when I was young, and my stepdad came into my life at 6 or 7 years old. That man raised me like I was his own. No hesitation, no step about it. He showed me what fatherhood actually meant. Showing up, being present, doing the work even when nobody was watching. I still talk to him. That shaped everything about how I see responsibility, how I see commitment. You don't walk away from people you love. You build something with them. So when my son Mavi was born in late 2023, everything shifted. Not the way I expected. I thought I'd be the same guy, just with a kid now. But holding him changed the math. I was doing $50,000 a month and giving nothing to the person I'd created. I was traveling to Thailand on contracts, running the shop, teaching classes, managing the agency. I was everywhere, except where it mattered. I took him to the shop with me sometimes. He'd be there in his car seat while I'm wrapping panels, making calls, handling the business. That's not being a father. That's bringing a kid along on your hustle. My stepdad never did that. He was present. He was there. The fork in the road wasn't complicated, just hard. I could keep building the wrap shop empire. I had a waiting list. I could hire more people, systematize it, maybe sell it for significant money down the line. Or I could step back and ask myself, what the hell am I doing? What am I really working for? By 2020, I'd already been to Thailand for the first time. I'd been to 30-plus countries by then. My dad was military, so I'd been traveling my entire life, since I was a baby, literally. I'd lived in 10-plus countries, seen the world in a way most people never would. I knew how to move through different places, different cultures. Thailand felt different, though. Something about the pace, the cost of living, the space to breathe. I spent $4,000 a month just on rent in Los Angeles. 4,000 for one bedroom in a decent area. You start looking at those numbers when you're doing $50,000 a month and still feel broke because the overhead is eating you alive. I had taxes, employees, equipment, insurance, rent. The machine required constant feeding. Pause. So I made a decision. I sold the wrap shop to one of my former students, someone I'd trained, who understood the business, who could take it forward. It wasn't an overnight decision, but it was clear once I made it. I'd built something real, something valuable, and I was going to let it go because there was something else I needed to find. My mom thought I was crazy, but my mom also knew who I was. I'd been a wild boy in my 20s, doing all the wrong things, looking for validation in all the wrong places. Self-development changed me. I read everything. I studied people who'd figured out how to live with intention. I realized that chasing money is chasing an infinite game. You never win. You never arrive. The noise just gets louder. At 37, I had the chance to step off that treadmill. Not because I'd made enough money to retire, but because I'd made enough money to realize money wasn't the point. The point was time. The point was Mavi. The point was asking, what do I actually want my life to look like? And what am I willing to do differently to get there? The answer was a lot. I was willing to walk away from $50,000 a month to find out who I was when nobody was watching, when the noise stopped, when there was space to actually breathe. That's when I started looking at flights to Thailand. Chapter 2. The message that was different. I was working at the dispensary in Pattaya when the notification came through on Facebook. It was from someone I didn't know, an American guy named Mike. The message said, "Sawadee crap." It was clearly copy-pasted from Google Translate. The grammar was wrong. No American actually talks like that. It was sweet in the way that made me laugh immediately. I got a lot of messages. Being a young Thai woman on Facebook means the notifications never stop. Guys from all over the world, all saying basically the same things. You are so beautiful. I come to Thailand. We have coffee. It's background noise. You develop a filter for it. Most of them don't even look at your photos. They just see Thai and click. But something about this one was different. I'm from Isan, from Buriram originally, and I came to Pattaya to work and build something. At 122 Cafe in the dispensary, I was building a life. It wasn't glamorous. It was real. I watched people come through. I listened to their stories. I learned about what people actually wanted versus what they said they wanted. The dispensary customers would talk. The cafe customers would sit for hours. You learn human nature when you work in places like that. I clicked on Mike's profile. Okay, so he's American. That wasn't unusual. But his photos were different from the usual guys who message. He wasn't taking selfies at bars trying to look tough. He wasn't in a car he clearly rented. He was just existing in photos. Him with his son. Him on a motorcycle. Him looking actually happy, like he wasn't performing happiness for the internet. I had a feeling about him. I can't explain it better than that. When you work in service, when you interact with people all day, you develop an instinct about who's real and who's performing. This guy felt real. Pause. So I messaged back, not with Google Translate, with actual words. Hi, thank you for message. Your Thai is not so good. And I added a laughing emoji. We started talking on Facebook Messenger, and then he suggested FaceTime. Every single day we FaceTimed. He'd be in LA, and I'd be in Pattaya, and he'd just call me and we'd talk, not flirting, actually talking. He told me about his life, about the wrap shop business, about Mavi, about what he was thinking about, what he was wrestling with. And I told him about my life, about Isan, about Pattaya, about my work, about my family, about the things I'd been through. When you FaceTime every day for weeks, you either get real fast, or you figure out you have nothing to say to each other. We just kept having more to say. He was honest in a way that surprised me. A lot of guys, they come to Thailand and they want you to be a certain thing. The beautiful Thai girl, the grateful Thai girl, the girl without a past. Mike didn't want that. He was saying, "Here's all my stuff. Here's what I'm carrying. You sure you want to deal with this?" And I appreciated that. I appreciated that he was trusting me with reality instead of a version of himself he thought I'd like. My coworkers at the dispensary would tease me. "You always on FaceTime with that American." Yeah, okay. I'm talking to this American every day, but it's different. He wasn't trying to buy me. He wasn't trying to save me. He was just talking to me, seeing me. The crazy thing is, I saw him first on People You May Know. Facebook had recommended his profile to me, and I think he saw me the same way. He'd been searching flights to Thailand because he'd been there before. He had Thai friends, and the algorithm showed him Thai people. But then we actually talked to each other, and the algorithm didn't matter anymore. The recommendation was almost irrelevant. What mattered was, this person gets me, and I get him. When he started talking about coming here, coming to Thailand to see me, I felt something shift in my chest. The guys who message on Facebook, they say they're coming. They say a lot of things. But this one felt like he actually meant it. Like he wasn't just another guy looking for an experience. Like he was looking for something real. And I was terrified and excited in equal measure. Chapter 3. Something Worth. Crossing an Ocean for. I told my mom I was flying to Thailand to meet a woman I'd been talking to on FaceTime for a few weeks. The look on her face was something between amusement and concern. She knew me, though. She knew I wasn't a guy who made impulsive decisions. She knew I'd been to Thailand before, in 2020 when I was still in the thick of the wrap shop grind. But this was different. "You sure about this?" she asked. Not in a disapproving way, just in a mother way, making sure I'd thought it through. I had thought it through. Or maybe I'd thought about it to death, and this was the part where you just have to trust yourself. I'd been to 30+ countries. I'd lived in 10+. I knew how to move through the world. I knew what it felt like when something was right, and when it was just another thing to accomplish. This felt right. Pafan and I had FaceTimed every single day. That's not nothing. That's not casual. That's a commitment. That's showing up day after day in a small window where we'd just talk, no filters. She told me about her life in Pattaya, about working at the dispensary and the cafe, about being from Isan. I told her about the business, about Mavi, about the choice I'd made to sell the shop. She never once asked me for money, never made it about that. That sounds like a small thing, but if you've been on the internet talking to people from Southeast Asia, as an American, you know that's not normal. A lot of guys meet scammers. A lot of guys get played. But Pafan was direct. "I have my work. I take care of myself. I'm looking for something real with you." That was the honesty. That was the thing that made me believe this was worth the flight. Pause. The night before I flew out, I was sitting in my apartment in LA, and it hit me. I'm actually doing this. I'm actually getting on a plane and flying to Thailand to meet someone I know from FaceTime. By every conventional measure, This is a crazy decision. But crazy and right aren't always opposites. My stepdad called me. He knew where I was headed. He didn't tell me not to go. He didn't try to talk sense into me. What he said was, "You'll know, you'll get there, and you'll know if this is real." That's the thing about a man who's taught you about genuine connection. He trusts you to recognize it when you find it. I packed light, one carry-on. I didn't need much. I'd been traveling since I was a baby, and I'd learned that you don't need a lot. You need enough. You need your documents, your intention, your openness. Everything else is just weight. At the airport in LA, standing in line for security, I thought about the wrap shop. I thought about the customers I wouldn't see, the revenue I was leaving on the table, the status of being a successful entrepreneur in a major city. And then I thought about the noise, how it never stopped, how I'd spend my whole life chasing the next level, the next achievement, the next 50,000. How I'd miss everything that mattered while building things that didn't. This was different. This was the moment where I was betting on something other than money. I was betting on a person. I was betting on a feeling. I was betting on the idea that maybe the most important thing I could build wasn't a business empire. Maybe it was a life with someone who saw me and let me see her. So I got on the plane. Chapter 4. Seeing it to believe it. He texted me when he landed, just a simple message, "I'm here." And my heart did something it doesn't usually do. I'm a practical person. I work in service. I understand reality. But when I read "I'm here," I felt something shift. I went to pick him up at the airport and I brought flowers, red roses. I know how that sounds. It's something you do when you're trying to be romantic, trying to set a scene. But it wasn't like that. I brought them because I wanted him to know. I'm serious about this. I'm not treating this casual. You flew across the world, and I want you to know that I see that I value that I'm not going to waste your time. When I saw him come through the arrivals area, it was strange. I'd seen him on FaceTime every single day for weeks. I knew his face. I knew his voice. But seeing him in person is different. He became three-dimensional, real, solid, tall, taller than I expected. The way he moved through the crowd was different too, confident, like he knew how to occupy space. His shoulders were broader than the screen had suggested. His presence filled the arrivals area in a way that made me hold my breath without meaning to. He smiled when he saw me. Not a big theatrical smile, just a genuine smile, like he was relieved and happy and also a little nervous, like he was drinking me in, taking in my short hair, the way I dressed, the smile on my face, and I could see something shift in his eyes. Interest, attraction, the kind that doesn't announce itself but settles into your chest and stays there. I felt it too, the electrical quality of being seen, really seen, not through a screen, by a person who'd flown across the world and was looking at me like he'd just understood why. I gave him the flowers, and he held them like he was holding something precious, like I'd given him something more than stems and petals. His hand brushed mine when he took them, and even that small contact felt charged with something neither of us was ready to name yet. We didn't jump into anything. We just went to the hotel, let him rest, let him shower off the long flight. I treated him like a king from that first moment. but not in a subservient way, in the way of someone who genuinely cares, giving him what he needed, making sure he was comfortable. I brought him water. I showed him how to adjust the shower. I brought him towels and laid them out where they were easy to reach. Pause. The next day we went on our first real date. We got on a motorbike, my motorbike, and I drove us around Pattaya. I showed him where I worked, where I spent my days, the dispensary, the cafe, the streets I walked. I wanted him to see my actual life, not a tourist version of Pattaya. He wasn't interested in the tourist stuff anyway. He wanted to see how I lived. As I drove, I felt his arms around my waist, holding on to me. The warmth of his body pressed against my back, the feeling of being held by him. It was different from being held by anyone else. It felt like trust. It felt like he was letting go of his own weight and trusting me to steer us both safely through the traffic. We went to a street vendor and got pad krapao. It was 50 baht. 50 baht. He looked at the price, and then at me, and something registered in his eyes. The cost of living here. He spent more on coffee in LA than this meal cost. And it was good. Real Thai food, not made for tourists. Made by someone's mother, probably, for actual people who live here. He ate it slowly, like he was paying attention to every bite. He wasn't making performance of it. He was just eating, and I was watching, and there was something about the way he was present that made my chest feel tight. I found myself watching him eat, noticing the way he closed his eyes for a moment after the first bite, the way his jaw moved, the concentration on his face. Most of the men who come here, they're trying so hard to have an experience. They're trying to consume Thailand, to collect moments. Mike was just experiencing it, being with me, not trying to own it or impress me, just there. I reached over and wiped sauce from his lip with my thumb. It was an impulse. I didn't think about it. I just did it. And the way he looked at me afterward told me it meant something. That small touch, that casual intimacy. That night we talked for hours. Just talked. Sitting at a cafe, drinking Thai tea, and I could feel him actually listening to me, not waiting for his turn to talk, not thinking about what he was going to say next, actually hearing what I was saying. I told him about my past, about the things I'd been through, about my family, about why I came to Pattaya, about the things I wanted. And he listened like each word mattered to him, like my story was important, like I was important. And he told me more about Mavi, about becoming a father, about how it changed his perspective on everything, about the wrap shop and why he sold it, the choice he'd made. And I understood. This man left his entire life because he wanted something different. He didn't know what that was yet, but he was willing to find out. And somewhere in that finding out, he wanted to include me. The energy was different. That's the only way I can describe it. Different from the other relationships I'd had. Different from the guys who come and go. There was a frequency we matched on that felt uncommon. When he walked me to the motorbike, he took my hand, just held it. He didn't try anything. He didn't push. He just held my hand like he wanted me to know that he was here, that he was real, that the attraction I was feeling wasn't one-sided. Chapter 5. A Different Frequency. Sitting on the back of Pafan's motorbike driving through Pattaya, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, not excitement. That's common. Not novelty. That passes. This was clarity, like the fog that had been following me around for a decade was starting to lift. She navigated the motorbike traffic like she was dancing with it. Smooth, confident, sure. She'd lived here long enough to know how the city moved, where the tourists were, where the real Pattaya was. And she wanted to show me the real Pattaya, not the resort version, not the version designed for consumption. Her Pattaya. But more than anything, I was aware of her body against mine, the curve of her back against my chest, her hair brushing my face as she navigated. When she leaned into a turn, I held her more tightly. When the traffic stopped, I felt the weight of her, the realness of her. This was no longer theoretical. This was a woman I was holding, a woman who'd flown across the world to be with, a woman whose short hair smelled like jasmine, and whose hands were steering both of us through this city. We stopped at the Pad Kra Pao vendor, and when I looked at the price, the math was so simple it made me laugh. 50 baht, less than $2. I'd spent that much on a coffee in LA. I'd spent that much on a tip in LA. And here it was, a meal, a good meal, made fresh, made with intention. But it wasn't the price that struck me. It was what the price meant. It meant that my entire quality of life could be maintained here on a fraction of what I spent in LA. It meant that the $4,000 a month in rent that had felt like the price of success was actually the price of delusion. In LA, I was making $50,000 a month and feeling broke. Here, I could live extraordinarily well on a fraction of that. The wrap shop had tied me to one place, one city, one way of being. The overhead demanded it. The employees demanded it. The customers demanded it. It was a golden cage, and I didn't even realize I was caged until I got on a motorbike in Pattaya, with a woman who wasn't asking me for anything except to be present. Pafan said something that stuck with me that first week. We were talking about the future, and she asked me, "What do you want? Not what you think you're supposed to want. What do you actually want?" And I realized I didn't have an answer. I'd spent so long doing what I was supposed to do, being the successful entrepreneur, the involved father, the guy who had it all figured out, that I'd forgotten to ask what I actually wanted. Pause. What I was discovering in those early days with Pafan was that I wanted to live simply. I wanted to move without the weight of empire. I wanted to be present with someone I loved, without the constant pull of a business that needed me. I wanted to build something with another person instead of building another thing. But more than that, I was discovering that I wanted her. The way she moved, the intelligence in her eyes, the way she laughed with her whole body, the way she took my hand when we walked through the market, linking her fingers through mine like she was claiming something, like she was saying, "You're mine, you're here with me." She took me to Sky Residences where she lived, 18,000 baht a month, around $500, a modern apartment, clean, organized, a view. She'd built a life here on her own terms. She wasn't waiting for a man to save her. She wasn't performing poverty for sympathy. She was just living, working, building. When we got there, she made me coffee without asking. While I sat on the balcony looking at the city, she was in the kitchen, doing the small work of care, I could hear the sounds of her making it, the way she moved through the space she knew better than anywhere else. And when she handed me the cup, she sat close enough that our knees touched. And she wanted to know if I could live like that, not in deprivation, in simplicity, in intention. Could I let go of the status symbols that had felt important in LA? Could I walk away from the narrative of successful entrepreneur and just be a person trying to build a life with someone he loved? The honest answer was, I didn't know yet, but I was willing to find out. My stepdad used to say that the real test of a man isn't whether he can succeed in the conventional sense. It's whether he can be faithful to what actually matters, whether he can stay when staying is hard, whether he can build something real instead of something impressive. Sitting with Pafan in her apartment, looking out at Pattaya, her hand resting on my thigh with complete ease, like she'd already decided we were past the part where that was bold. I felt like maybe I was finally learning what he'd been trying to teach me all those years. That fatherhood he showed me wasn't about providing the most. It was about being present. It was about choosing the person and the life you wanted to build, and then actually showing up for it every day, without performance, without needing recognition. Maybe that's what I was looking for, a different frequency, not the noise of LA and the rap shop, something quieter, something that required presence instead of productivity, something that asked, who are you when you're not proving anything? And could I be okay with that answer? Chapter 6. What she watched for. I watched him. That's what I did in those first weeks. I watched him when he didn't know I was watching. Watched how he moved through Pattaya. Watched how he treated people. Watched what he did when no one was looking. The thing about working in service for as long as I have is that you learn to read people. You see the difference between how people present themselves and how they actually are. You see the guys who are kind to their girlfriends but rude to the waitress. You see the ones who are generous with money to impress, but stingy with their time and attention. You see the performances. Mike wasn't performing anything. That was the thing. He came to Thailand as a guy who'd been successful in America, a guy who could have flexed that, who could have thrown money around and tried to impress me with what he'd built. He could have made this about his resources. A lot of guys do. They come and they want you to be grateful for what they can provide. It's a transaction in their minds. Mike wasn't like that. He had money, enough, but he wasn't trying to use it to control or impress. He was curious. He asked questions about how things worked in Thailand. He wanted to understand my life, not rescue it, or improve it, or take it over. He wanted to know what I thought about things, what I wanted, what I dreamed about. That first week, he told me everything. This is all my shit. I was a wild boy in my 20s. I did things I'm not proud of. I'm learning to be better. I have a son I love more than anything, and I made a choice to step away from my business to be present for him. I have stuff I'm working through. You still want to deal with me? It was the kind of honesty that made it hard to lie to him. How do you play games with someone who's being that real? I told him my stuff too, my past, the things I'd been through, the relationships that hadn't worked out, the mistakes I'd made. And he heard it like it was important information about who I was, not like it was something that made me less than. He wasn't looking for a blank slate. He was looking for a person. Pause. I watched how he moved through money. That was telling. He'd spend on experiences, on good food, on quality time. But he wasn't careless with it. He wasn't trying to prove he had money by wasting it. He was making choices, conscious choices. That told me he wasn't one of the guys who'd come here and burn through his savings, trying to own the experience. I watched how he treated people in service. We went to restaurants, to cafes, and I saw how he spoke to the staff. Respectfully, genuinely, like they mattered. He learned some Thai phrases. He made an effort. He wasn't the tourist who just wants to be catered to. He wanted to actually engage with the culture, with the people, with Thailand as a real place. I watched how he talked about Mavi, his son, and that's where I saw the deepest part of him. When he talked about being a father, his whole voice changed. It became soft, serious, like this was the thing he cared about more than anything else. And he'd built a business, he'd made money, he'd accomplished things. But what he really wanted was to be present for his son. That mattered to him in a way that nothing else did. That made me trust him. A man who loves his child like that, who's willing to make hard choices for that love, that's a man with his priorities straight. I started doing small things. I'd bring him coffee in the morning, made the way he liked it, strong, with a little bit of sweetness. I'd adjust his collar when it wasn't sitting right. I'd brush dust off his shoulder. I'd touch his forearm when I was talking to him, my fingers lingering just a little longer than necessary. Not in a clumsy way. It was natural. It was how my body wanted to express what my words couldn't fully say. He seemed to understand the language. He'd lean into these touches. He'd find excuses to be close to me. When we walked through the market, he'd put his hand on the small of my back, steering me gently through the crowds. When we sat at cafes, his knee would touch mine under the table, and he'd leave it there, not moving away, acknowledging that small contact as something that mattered. By the end of the first week, we were talking about the future seriously. Not if, but when. Not hypothetically, but actually. Could he stay in Thailand? Did he want to? What would it look like to build a life here? He was looking at me differently by then, like he was seeing me not as an idea or an experience, but as a partner, as someone to build with. And I was doing the same. This wasn't a vacation for him. This wasn't a thing to check off. This was the moment where he was deciding what comes next. And he wanted it to include me. I brought him to 122 Cafe one afternoon. My co-workers teased me, and I brought him in anyway, introduced him around, showed him where I spent my days, and he looked at me working, saw me with my customers, saw the real part of my life, and instead of looking bored or wanting to pull me away, he just smiled, like he was proud of me, like he could see why I loved this work. I found myself moving closer to him without thinking about it, touching his arm when I spoke to my coworkers about him, leaning into his body when we stood together. It was instinctive, the way my body had decided he belonged to me and wanted to broadcast it. That's what I watched for. That's what told me he was real, not the big romantic gestures, the small ones, the daily choices, the way he saw me when I wasn't trying, the way he treated the people around us, the way he was becoming someone I could actually build a future with. Chapter 7. The Night That Changed Things. We were sitting on her balcony at Sky Residences, and the city was stretched out below us like a circuit board of lights. She'd made Thai tea the way her mother makes it, and we had it in our hands, and it was one of those moments where nothing dramatic was happening and everything was changing. "Tell me the real story," Pafan said. "Not the wrap shop story, not the success story. Tell me who you were before all of it." She had a way of asking questions that made lying impossible. Like she'd already know if you did. Like she was asking for the actual truth, not the version you tell people at parties. So I told her about being a wild kid, about my biological dad not being there, about my stepdad showing up at 6 or 7 and choosing me, choosing to be my father without any biological claim to it, just deciding, this is my kid now, and I'm going to raise him like my own, and that shaped everything. It taught me that family isn't about blood. It's about choice. It's about showing up. I told her about the Air Force, about being stationed overseas, about the contracts in the Middle East, about living in all those countries, and I mean actually living, not just visiting, learning languages, making friends, understanding different ways of being. By the time I was in my 30s, I'd been to 30-plus countries, lived in 10-plus. I'd seen the world in a way that most people never do. But seeing the world and belonging to a place are different things, and I realized that all that traveling, all that success, all those countries, I was running. I was moving so fast and so far that I never had to ask the hard questions. Why am I doing this? What do I actually want? Who do I want to build with? Mavi changed that. When he was born, suddenly I was responsible for another human being in a way I'd never been responsible before, and I realized that all the traveling, all the running, wasn't going to work anymore. I had to choose. I had to settle enough to actually be there for someone. Pause. So I sold the shop, I told her. It was a good business, was making money, but it was eating me alive, and I realized, who am I doing this for? Not for Mavi. I was too busy to be with him. Not for me. The money wasn't making me happy. I was just on a treadmill, running faster and faster, trying to get somewhere, and having no idea where that somewhere actually was. She listened like she was hearing the architecture of my whole life, the framework that I'd built, and was finally deconstructing. And when I finished, she told me hers. She told me about growing up in Isan, about her family, about the things that had hurt her, about relationships that didn't work out, about decisions she'd made that she wished she could unmake, about coming to Pattaya to build something on her own, about the dispensary and 122 Cafe and the life she'd created for herself, piece by piece. I didn't want to need anyone, she said, because when you need someone, they can hurt you, they can leave. So I built a life where I could take care of myself, but then it was lonely. You can take care of yourself and still be lonely. She looked at me. And then you came with your bad tie and your questions, and I thought maybe lonely was familiar enough to feel safe. But it's not, I said. No, it's not. This doesn't feel safe. This feels terrifying. but it also feels like it might be worth it. We sat there in the dark, and I realized that this was the moment. This was the fork in the road for real. I could go back to America. I could try to make the wrap shop work again, or find another business, another way to hustle. I could be a good father to Mavi from a distance, sending money, visiting sometimes. That was a valid path. A lot of people do it that way. Or I could commit to something different, to staying, to building a life here with Pafan, to being present not just for my son but for her, to creating something quiet and real and hard, the way my stepdad had done, the way he'd chosen to show up every day for someone he loved. The space between us felt charged, the night air, the city below, the fact that we were finally asking the question that mattered. I leaned toward her, slowly, like I was asking permission with the movement itself. She didn't pull away. She tilted her head up, her eyes holding mine. "I'm going to stay," I said. Not, "I think I might." Not, "if things work out." Just, "I'm going to stay. I'm going to build this with you. I'm going to figure out how to be a father to Mavi, and a partner to you, and a person trying to live with intention instead of momentum." She reached over and took my hand. "You're sure?" But she was asking it the way she asks everything, like she actually needed to know, like my answer mattered. I've never been more sure of anything in my life, and I meant it. The noise had finally stopped. For the first time in decades, there was quiet, and in that quiet, I could finally hear what I actually wanted. It was her. It was this. It was the choice to stay. I reached up and tucked a strand of her hair behind her ear. My fingertips brushed against her cheekbone. She leaned into the touch like it was something she'd been waiting for. "What are you thinking?" she whispered. "That I want to know what you taste like," I said. And I did. I'd been thinking about it since the airport, since she wiped sauce from my lip, since every moment of proximity had become something charged and electric. She moved closer, slowly, like she was letting me set the pace but had already decided where this was heading. Her hand came up to my face, her fingers tracing along my jaw. The touch was light but deliberate, not tentative, like she'd already mapped the territory in her mind and was now confirming it with her hands. "Then find out," she said. I kissed her then, slowly at first, tasting the sweetness of the Thai tea on her lips, the warmth of her mouth, the way she sighed against me like she'd been waiting for this moment as long as I had. My hand found the back of her neck, drawing her closer. The world fell away. There was only the feel of her, the taste of her, the way she kissed me back like she was trying to communicate something her words couldn't hold. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing harder. She had her hand on my chest, and I could feel her heartbeat through her palm. Or maybe it was mine. We were beating at the same rhythm. "I've been thinking about that since the airport," I told her. "Good," she said, and smiled that smile, "because we're not done yet." We kissed for hours that night, not rushed, not trying to prove anything, just exploring, learning, the way her body fit against mine, the way she'd reach up and touch my face, the way she'd press her forehead against mine, and just breathe with me. This was what I'd come to Thailand for, not just a woman, a person, Someone who could kiss me like she was surrendering and claiming at the same time. Chapter 8. Letting Someone In. She stood in the doorway of her apartment at Sky Residences, one hand on the frame, watching him take in the ocean view. 18,000 baht a month for this place, the price of a small dream. She'd worked for this, saved for it, claimed a corner of the city as hers, and now she was inviting him into it. Mike stepped onto the balcony, and she held her breath without meaning to. The view was stunning, the kind of view that made you feel like you'd made it, like you belonged somewhere that mattered. She'd rehearsed this moment in her head 100 times. Invite him, cook, let him see her home, let him see her. It's beautiful, he said, and she could tell he meant it, not just the view. He was looking at how she lived, the careful arrangement of things, the way she'd organized her space, like someone building a nest. She disappeared into the kitchen before the nervousness could overtake her completely. The pad kra pao, the holy basil chicken, was something she knew how to do perfectly. 50 baht at the market. Simple, real, hers. The smell of basil and garlic filled the small kitchen as she cooked. Her hands moved through the familiar motions. The minced chicken, the heat, the exact moment to add the fish sauce. This was something she could control. This was something she could give him that was entirely true. Come, she called when it was ready, and she saw him emerge from the balcony. Something different in his face, softer, present. They ate at her small table, and he closed his eyes when he took the first bite. "This is incredible," he said. "Did you make this?" "Of course I made this." She smiled despite the fear moving through her chest. "I'm not just a face, you know." "I know that," he said, and the way he looked at her made her believe it. His eyes were taking her in like she was the most interesting thing in the world. She stood up to get water, and he reached out, catching her hand, just held it for a moment. "Thank you," he said, "for this, for the food, for inviting me here." She squeezed his hand gently before pulling away. It was a small gesture, but it meant everything. Pause. After they ate, she moved around the apartment, clearing dishes, tidying. She could feel him watching her work. She brought him tea, made it the way he liked it, and handed it to him with both hands, a sign of respect, of care. They sat on her small sofa, and the city spread out beyond them like a secret. She was aware of every point where their bodies almost touched, the weight of what was happening, the reality of it. "Pafan," he said, and she turned to face him. "Can I ask you something?" She nodded, though her heart had already started bracing for the question she feared most, the ones about her past, her intentions, whether she was really capable of this. "Why did you invite me here?" The question surprised her. It was so simple, so direct. She thought about how to answer. The truth was complicated. She was terrified. She'd been hurt before, badly, in ways that had taught her that opening your heart was dangerous, that men left, that love was conditional, that trust was something people took advantage of. "Because I'm tired of protecting myself," she said finally, "and because when I'm with you, I don't want to." It was the most honest thing she'd said to him. It cost her something. He reached for her, pulling her close. His arm came around her shoulders, drawing her against his chest. She could hear his heartbeat, feel the rise and fall of his breathing. She let herself relax into him, her head resting against his shoulder. "I'm letting you in," she said quietly, her hand moving to his chest. "Don't make me regret it." He didn't promise her the world. He didn't make grand declarations. He just held her, and in that small gesture, she felt something shift, the first real crack in the wall she'd built around her heart. He reached down and lifted her chin up toward him. He kissed her then, a deeper kiss than the one on the balcony, a kiss that said, "I'm staying. I'm not going anywhere. I choose you." She climbed into his lap, straddling him. She wanted him to feel how serious she was, how much she wanted this. Her hands went to his shoulders, and she looked directly into his eyes. "I want this," she said. "I want you. All of you." He pulled her closer, one hand moving to the small of her back, the other cupping the back of her head. They kissed with an intensity that had been building since the airport. She felt his hands move under her shirt, his thumbs tracing the skin of her back. She shivered, pressing closer. They moved to her bedroom slowly, a journey across the apartment that took hours because they kept stopping to kiss, to touch, to look at each other and confirm this was real. By the time they were in bed, the last of her walls had crumbled. She lay against his chest in the darkness, his arms wrapped around her, his lips pressing to her forehead. They weren't just having sex, they were merging, becoming one thing instead of two separate people trying to figure out if they fit. Afterward, she woke in the middle of the night and watched him sleep. She reached out and traced the line of his jaw, the slope of his shoulder. She was in love with him, completely, impossibly. There was no turning back from this. Chapter 9. Morning after. The apartment was still dark when he woke. For a moment he didn't know where he was. Then he remembered. Sky residences, the ocean view. Pafan asleep beside him. He moved carefully, not wanting to wake her. She slept the way she seemed to do everything else, with complete commitment, a forearm across her eyes, breathing deep and even. The sleep of someone who wasn't plagued by the constant low-level anxiety he carried in his bones. The kitchen was small and bright once he turned on the light. He found her coffee supplies and started making a pot, not thinking about the ritual of it, just doing it. The smell of brewing coffee filling the small space. The ordinary miracle of domestic life. He stepped onto the balcony with his mug and waited for the city to wake up. The sun was coming now, bleeding orange across the water. A new day. He found himself thinking about flights, the ones he usually scanned for on his phone first thing. Back to the States, back to Mavi. The constant calculation of how to be in two places at once. But this morning, he wasn't checking flights. It was such a small thing, but it meant something. It meant he was allowing himself to be here, to be present in this moment without already planning his escape from it. Pafan emerged from the bedroom maybe 20 minutes later, coming up behind him while he stood at the railing. She wrapped her arms around his waist, pressing herself against his back. Her cheek rested against his shoulder blade. He could feel her breathe against him. "You're awake," she murmured. her voice still heavy with sleep. He turned in her embrace, wrapping his arms around her. She was wearing one of his shirts, the fabric falling past her hips. The sight of her in his clothes did something to his chest. "I made coffee," he said, kissing the top of her head. She pulled back just enough to look up at him. Her hair was messy. Her eyes were soft. She looked completely different from the composed woman at the market. She looked like she belonged to him. "I love you," she said simply. He hadn't expected it, but it didn't surprise him. "I love you too," he said, and kissed her again. They sat on the balcony in comfortable silence, her tucked against his side, his arm around her shoulders. Her hand rested on his thigh, her fingers drawing small circles on the fabric of his shorts. No pressure to be entertaining. No need to perform or explain. Just two people drinking coffee and watching the world become fully awake. "Last night was good," she said after a while. "Yeah," he said. "It was." He was thinking about his own life back home, the pace of it, the constant hustle, the way success was measured in metrics and growth and forward momentum. All of that seemed to exist in a different dimension from this moment, from the taste of her coffee, from the way the light hit her face. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. The honest answer was complicated. He was thinking about how you could spend a lifetime in motion and never actually arrive anywhere. How you could have impressive things, a business, a reputation, money, and still feel fundamentally unanchored. "How different this is," he said. "How much I like it." She reached over and took his hand, threading her fingers through his. They watched the day happen together, and he felt something settle into his chest. This was what peace felt like. Pause. They spent the day moving through the apartment, through the city, through each other's presence. No grand plans, just breakfast, a walk, a conversation on the balcony. The things that tourists don't photograph, the texture of actual life. She brought him food constantly. She'd disappear into the kitchen and return with fruit, with snacks, with coffee at the exact moment he'd want it. It wasn't subservient. It was her language of care. Each time she brought him something, she'd set it in front of him and then lean down to kiss his shoulder, his neck, his cheek. Small touches that accumulated into a constant presence. He found himself noticing small details, the way she laughed with her whole body, how she moved through space with surprising grace, the intelligence in her eyes when she talked about her work, her dreams, the books she wanted to read, the way her hand never left his, whether they were sitting, walking, or standing. She was constantly touching him, her fingers on his arm, her hand on his back, her head leaning against his shoulder. That evening, lying in bed, she turned to him and said, "You're different than I thought you'd be. Is that good or bad?" "Good," she said. "Better. You're real." He thought about that word, real. In a city built on fantasy for tourists, the rarest thing you could be was real. And somehow, with her, that's what he'd found the space to become. Chapter 10, showing him her world. She wanted to show him the real Thailand, not the beachfront bars where they served overpriced drinks to drunk foreigners, but the Thailand where she actually lived. The dark side of Pattaya, the quieter neighborhoods, the actual city beneath the tourist skin. "Come," she said one morning, gesturing for him to follow. "I'll show you." They took the motorbike. She drove. He held on to her carefully, learning the balance of it. The way you had to trust the person steering. The way you had to surrender to the speed. His arms were around her waist, his body aligned with hers. She leaned back into him at the curves, and he felt the weight of her, the trust implicit in the way she drove without hesitation. The market was alive in the morning, not the sanitized tourist market, but the real one where vendors sold to locals. Here the pad krapao was 50 baht, or sometimes less, if the vendor knew you. The boba was 20 baht, less than $1. Real prices for real people living real lives. She moved through the market like she owned it, nodding at vendors she knew, stopping to inspect vegetables and meat with the careful eye of someone who actually cooked from these ingredients. She was in her element here, competent, powerful, free. "This is my city," she said, as they walked through the stalls. "This is the real Thailand." She bought things, not just groceries, but conversation. A woman selling fish recognized her and asked about her family. An old man selling coconuts joked with her in Thai. She was woven into this place in a way that made her fundamentally different from the tourists who passed through. She grabbed his hand and pulled him through the crowd, her grip firm and warm. She'd stopped to show him something, turning to face him, her hand never leaving his. When she pointed at a vendor, her other hand would come to rest on his chest, or she'd lean against his arm. They stopped for boba at a small stall, and the vendor's face registered the moment she realized Mike was foreign. "Your boyfriend?" she asked Pafan in Thai, then glanced at Mike with an expression that suggested she was assessing his worthiness. Pafan laughed and pulled him closer, her arm linking through his. "Not yet," she said, "but we'll see." The vendor nodded, satisfied that Pafan was in control of the situation, and handed over 2 perfect boba drinks with a smile. Mike handed Pafan her drink, and she held it in one hand while her other hand found his. She sipped the boba through the straw, watching him over the cup. When a boba pearl got stuck, she laughed and he helped her, his thumb brushing her lip. She caught his hand gently, pressing a quick kiss to his knuckle before releasing it. Pause. They rode back to her apartment through neighborhoods that felt far removed from the beach. Quiet streets, houses with actual gardens, the real Pattaya that existed for residents, not performances for tourists. "Most foreigners never see this side," she said when they stopped at a temple, quiet and peaceful. "They see the shows, the bars, the things made for them. But this," she gestured at the temple, the monks walking through the courtyard, the ordinary spirituality of it. "This is the real thing." She was giving him something precious, not just access to a place, but access to her understanding of it, the way she moved through the world, the knowledge of where the real things were hidden. They walked around the temple grounds, and she kept her arm linked through his. When they climbed the steps, she held his hand, pulling him up beside her. At the top, she turned to face the view, and he stood behind her, his arms wrapping around her waist. She leaned back against him, her head tilting back to rest against his shoulder. On the motorbike ride home, she felt him relax behind her, the death grip of the beginning replaced with something easier: trust, familiarity. His hands rested gently on her waist instead of clutching for balance. His body moved with hers through the turns like they'd been doing this for years. "I like it when you show me things," he said when they stopped. "I like seeing how you see the world." She leaned back against him, turning her head to kiss his neck. "I like showing you," she said. For a moment they just sat there on the motorbike, parked in her quiet neighborhood, and she felt something settle in her chest. The possibility that this could work, that she could give him her city, her understanding, her way of being, and that he might actually value it. "There's so much more to show you," she said. "Then show me," he said. "I'm not going anywhere." And she believed him. Chapter 11. The Question Under Everything. He stood in the empty shop space, the one he'd built from nothing 5 years ago. Every wall, every piece of equipment, every system a reflection of his vision. The wrap shop had taken everything he had. 16-hour days. Solving problems alone when staff quit and left him back at square one, again and again. Growing it from $0 to $500,000 a year in revenue. But that was 5 years ago. Before Mavi. Before he understood that there was a cost to grinding that hard, and that cost was paid by other people. He'd reached a fork in the road sometime around his son's 2nd birthday. The business was successful, but it required his constant presence. One problem: he had a son. A lot of things changed in his life when that kid was born, and the 17-hour days suddenly looked less like ambition and more like abandonment. The marketing agency was paying him enough to live on, enough to pay child support, enough, he discovered when he looked at the numbers carefully, to live somewhere like Thailand, if he was smart about it. And he was smart about it. He always had been. He sold the wrap shop to a former student, kept the relationship, kept access to the space if he ever needed it, but let go of the machine that required his life force to run. It was the sanest decision he'd made in years, and it had cost him more emotionally than any business decision he'd ever made. Success in America meant something specific. It meant cars and houses and visible markers of achievement. Walking away from that, even for a better life, felt like failure to parts of him that he'd been taught to value. Pause. The real estate agent kept using words like charming and authentic, which Mike had learned meant small and not Western. But the house on the dark side of Pattaya was $800 a month, and it had what mattered: a yard, a courtyard, the possibility of something that resembled the life he wanted to build. The neighborhood was a strange mix of Pattaya's actual residents, a 70-year-old Swiss tennis champion who looked 50 and had 100 and some trophies in his living room, American families who'd moved here years ago with kids who'd grown up speaking Thai, Japanese families who seemed to exist in their own cheerful bubble, kids on bikes, dogs, the texture of an actual neighborhood. He stood in the empty courtyard and tried to imagine Pafan here. Her growing grass. He'd learned she was obsessed with growing grass, about the grass growing, which seemed to be her way of saying, "We're staying. This is real. This is permanent." The numbers made sense. $3,000 to $4,000 a month for both of them, enough to live well, to eat well, to exist without constant financial anxiety. That was what he'd been paying just for rent in Los Angeles. Here it covered everything. The house, food, transportation, the small luxuries that made life feel human. He thought about the motorbike, 30,000 baht used, about $1,000, or 60 baht a month to rent one. The boba for 20 baht instead of $8 in LA. The 50 baht meals that tasted better than expensive restaurant food because they were real. A peaceful day is a win, he found himself thinking. When had that become his measuring stick for success? At what point had he stopped needing the constant forward motion and started needing the space to actually live? He walked through the house again, taking measurements and imagining furniture. His apartment in Thailand, the place where he would build a different kind of life. Pause. Back at Pafan's apartment, he sat on the balcony and thought about what he was building. Not a business this time. Not something that needed to be scaled or optimized or leveraged for maximum profit. Just a life, a real one. With a woman he was beginning to love. In a place where money worked harder than it ever had. Where you could breathe. He pulled out his laptop and started running the numbers one more time, just to be sure. The social media income would cover the flights home, flying back to the States every single month, because Mavi was there. Because his son mattered more than anything else. Because his stepdad had taught him that fatherhood comes first. I actually spend more time with him than I do out here with her, he thought. But of course, that's not on social media. The real metrics of life, the ones that matter, are never the ones people post about. He wouldn't have come to Thailand if he couldn't figure out how to be present in his son's life. That was the non-negotiable. Everything else, Pafan, the house, the slow pace, all of it was built on the foundation of that commitment. Pafan came out onto the balcony with tea. She set it down beside him and settled into his lap without asking, tucking her legs up and wrapping an arm around his neck. She leaned her head against his, her cheek resting against his temple. "What are you thinking about?" she asked softly. "How lucky I am," he said, kissing the top of her head. "The house, the courtyard, you, all of it." She squeezed him gently. "We'll make it work," she said, and he believed her. He closed the laptop and looked out at the ocean. For the first time in years, he felt like the pieces might actually fit together. Not perfectly, not without cost, but in a way that allowed him to be a good father and a good man. In a way that allowed him to build a life with someone he loved more than anything, except his son. That seemed like enough. Chapter 12. What the morning told her. She learned his rhythms the way you learn a language, through repetition and attention. He liked his coffee strong. He needed time in the morning before he was fully present. He moved through the world with a kind of strategic thinking that was beautiful to watch, even when it made him anxious. But more than anything, she wanted to take care of him. Not because he needed it. He was clearly capable of taking care of himself, but because it was how she knew how to love. She began waking before him, even though she hated mornings. She'd slip out of bed carefully and make his coffee exactly as he liked it. while it brewed, she'd lay out his clothes, the ones she knew he felt good in, his favorite shirt, shorts that fit just right. By the time he woke, everything was ready. He noticed the first time she did it. She could see it in his face, a flicker of confusion, then recognition, then something deeper. Gratitude mixed with tenderness, like he'd never experienced someone thinking about him before he was even awake. "You don't have to do that," he said. "I want to," she replied. And it was true. The coffee came next. She was not a morning person, would never be a morning person, but she woke earlier than she used to, just to make his coffee, to have it ready, to create the small ritual that said, "I'm thinking about you. You matter to me. Let me take care of you." She'd bring it to him on the balcony, setting it down beside him, and then she'd lean over the back of the chair to wrap her arms around him from behind. She'd press her lips to his shoulder, to his neck. She'd rest her cheek against his back. What she didn't understand, not fully, was how much these small acts would break something open inside him. Pause. It happened one evening, during dinner. They were sharing a bowl, as they often did, a way of being together, of intimacy beyond the physical. She transferred a piece of beef from her portion to his, as she always did. She ate less. He needed more fuel. It was a simple equation that felt natural to her. But this time, he stopped eating. She glanced up and saw something in his face she'd never seen before. His eyes were shining. He was holding a piece of beef, and he was crying. "What's wrong?" She moved closer, alarmed. "Did I hurt you?" "Nobody's ever done that for me before," he said quietly. "Nobody's ever just taken care of me like that, without being asked, without keeping score." She understood then. These small acts, the clothes, the coffee, the beef from her bowl, they weren't just care. They were proof that she saw him, that she chose him, that she was willing to put his needs equal to, sometimes above, her own. In her culture, in the way she'd been raised, this was love, not romantic declarations or grand gestures, but the daily choice to make someone's life easier, smoother, better. "Everyone deserves that," she said softly. "You deserve that." But she was thinking, "I'm going to be the one who gives it to you, not because I have to, but because I want to, because you're worth waking up early for, because you're worth every small act of devotion." That night, she felt something shift in her own chest. The walls she'd built for so long, the ones that protected her from getting hurt, began to crumble. Not all at once, but steadily, with each small act of service. With each moment he responded to her care, not with obligation, but with gratitude. She was falling in love with him, not because he was perfect or because the story was easy, but because he received her love the way love deserved to be received, with recognition, with appreciation, with his own growing tenderness in return. She was all in, she realized. This was no longer theoretical. This was real. She started bringing him breakfast. She'd make it fresh, while he was still sleeping. Toast with butter and jam, fruit cut into small pieces. She'd set it on a tray and bring it to him with coffee, kissing him awake gently. She'd run his bath water at night, testing the temperature with her elbow before calling him in. She'd sit on the edge of the tub while he bathed, talking to him about her day, touching his shoulder, his chest, keeping that connection even in the simplest moments. She was composing a love letter out of actions, and he was reading it correctly. Chapter 13. The Courtyard. The house on the dark side of Pattaya became theirs in a way that felt earned rather than purchased. The courtyard was the heart of it, a space bounded by walls, open to the sky, separated from the rest of the world by concrete and the simple fact of ownership. Pafan became obsessed with the grass. She bought seeds. She watered obsessively. She would stand in the courtyard in the early morning, checking the soil, adjusting the sprinkler system, muttering to herself about drainage and nutrients. The grass was taking forever to grow. He understood what she was really saying with all that watering. She was saying, "We're staying. This is not temporary. I'm building something here. I'm planning a life with you in this place." When she was outside working on the grass, he'd bring her water. He'd stand beside her and listen to her frustrations about the seeds, the heat, the soil, and she'd lean into him while talking, her hip against his side, her hand reaching back to grip his thigh. The neighborhood revealed itself slowly. The Swiss tennis champion from across the street came over with wine and stories about how he'd won 100-and-something trophies playing tennis at 70. American families on the block had kids who switched seamlessly between English and Thai. Japanese families nodded politely, but stayed in their own sphere. Kids on bikes appeared in the late afternoon, playing in the street, the way children did before the internet made them all indoors. It was the kind of neighborhood you could belong to, not immediately, but over time, through showing up and being consistent and proving you weren't just passing through. Pause. But underneath all of this, the house, the courtyard, the settling into a place, there was something else he carried, the weight of being away from Mavi. His son was 2 years old, born in late 2023, early 2024, small enough that he still felt like a baby, but old enough to have opinions and preferences, and a voice that asked for things. The custody was 50-50, a legal arrangement that made sense until you actually had to live it. He flew back to the States every single month. Every single month. The plane tickets came out of the social media income, the business he'd built that gave him flexibility. That allowed him to be here and there, split between 2 places, 2 lives, 2 people he loved. When he was with Mavi, he spent 100% of his parenting time being present. No half measures. No checking his phone or thinking about Thailand. Just him and his son doing the work of actually knowing each other, teaching him how to be a person. "I actually spend more time with him than I do out here with her," he'd told Pafan once. But of course that's not on social media. She'd accepted it without question. She understood, in a way that he found both heartbreaking and beautiful, that his love for his son had to come first, that he was a package deal, that you couldn't have him without accepting the monthly trips back, the divided attention, the way he would always be somewhat incomplete in both places. His stepdad had taught him this, had modeled it, that fatherhood comes first, that you build your romantic life around your obligations to your children, not the other way around. You don't make your kid fit into your narrative. You make your narrative fit around your kid. Standing in the courtyard, watching Pafan water her grass, he thought about this balance he was trying to maintain. The way he'd intentionally moved to a place where the cost of living was low enough that he could afford to fly home constantly, where the time zone made it possible to FaceTime in the afternoon, where the flexibility existed to be the kind of father that mattered. Thailand was a choice he'd made because it was the only way to have both things, to be with Pafan, to be with Mavi, to not have to choose. When Pafan came inside, covered in dirt, wiping sweat from her forehead, he handed her a cold drink. She took it and pulled him into the kitchen, pressing him against the counter. She looked up at him, her hands on his chest. "I'm proud of you," she said. "The way you love your son, the way you're trying to build this." "I'm trying," he said, pulling her close. "Because I love you. Because you're worth trying for." She kissed him then, tasting like sweat and sunshine and dirt. It was the most real kiss they'd shared in a while. "Stop thinking so hard," she said when they broke apart. "You're making that face. Come on. I made you something special." In the kitchen, she had prepared pad krapao, but this time she'd made it exactly the way she knew he liked it. She served him a large portion and a smaller one for herself. While he ate, she sat across from him, chin resting on her clasped hands, watching him with complete focus. She never took her eyes off him while he ate, and when he was done, she stood and took his plate, kissing the top of his head before disappearing into the kitchen. This was their life now. Small moments, big love. Chapter 14. The Weight of Real. She watched him take the FaceTime call from Mavi, and something in how he became, the tenderness, the complete presence, the way his whole face changed, told her everything she needed to know about who he was. His son was small in the phone screen, 2 years old, with Mike's face already visible, the same intensity in his eyes. They talked about nothing. Trucks, a dog, a snack the boy had eaten. But the way Mike listened, the way he gave his complete attention to these small details, made her understand something fundamental about him. A man who loves his child like that is a man worth trusting, a man worth building a life with. It wasn't the kind of thought she'd planned. It just arrived, completely formed, watching him be a father across the distance. When the call ended, he was quiet for a long time. She didn't intrude on it. She'd learned that he needed space to be with the complexity of it, loving his son so much, being so far away, missing him, but also choosing to be here. "He's so smart," Mike said finally. "Already talking, already knowing exactly what he wants." "Like his father," Pafan said. Mike looked at her then, really looked at her, and she could see him making a calculation, weighing her against his doubts, testing whether she really understood what she was signing up for, not just him, but all of him. The son, the monthly flights, the divided heart. That night, she did something she'd been considering for weeks. After he showered, she took his hand and led him to the bed. She'd bought nail clippers, good ones, not the cheap kind from the market. "What are you doing?" he asked, bemused. "Just let me," she said. She took his hand gently and began to cut his nails, one by one, carefully, methodically. not because they needed cutting. Well, they did, but that wasn't really the point. She was doing this as an act of love, as a declaration of intent. This wasn't servitude. This was choice. This was her saying, I'm staying. I'm all in. I choose you, and I choose the weight of real. The nails fell onto the sheet as she worked. His hand was warm in hers, his fingers relaxed. He let her do this small, intimate thing without question or embarrassment. She held each finger like it mattered, like every part of him mattered. In my culture, this is what love looks like, she said quietly. Not the words, the actions. I like this, he said. I like this language. She finished both hands, then tapped his ankle. Feet too, she said. It wasn't a question. She lifted his foot into her lap and began working on his toenails with the same deliberate care, the same tenderness. He watched her, this woman who had his foot in her lap like it was the most natural thing in the world, and felt something break open in his chest that he didn't know was closed. You don't have to. That's my job, she said, not looking up. Quiet, final, like she'd decided it a long time ago, and he was just now finding out. Let me love you. She finished both feet, inspected her work, then set the clippers aside. She took his hands in hers and held them, looking at his face. The exhaustion, the hope, the weight of trying to be present in multiple places at once. I know about your son, she said. I know about the flights. I know about everything. And I'm still here. I'm still choosing this. It was the most vulnerable thing she'd said to him since letting him into her apartment. It was a promise and an acknowledgement and a surrender all at once. He pulled her close, and she felt the rightness of it, the way they fit, not perfectly but really, in the way that matters when you're building something that has to last. The nail-cutting ritual became part of their life after that, hands and feet every time, not something scheduled or forced, but something that happened naturally. She'd glance at his fingers across the table, or notice his toenails when they were lying in bed, and she'd disappear and come back with the clippers. Sit, she'd say, and he would. And she would take his hands, then his feet, and work through each one with the same quiet precision. If he ever tried to do it himself, she'd take the clippers right out of his hand. That's my job, she'd say. Not angry, not possessive, just certain. It was meditation for her, prayer almost, a small repeated act that said everything words couldn't. She had the grass growing now, the courtyard filling in, the neighbors saying hello, the routines building, the small pieces that made a life feel like something real. But more than any of that, she had this, a man who loved his child that deeply, who chose to show up for her anyway, who received her love the way it was meant to be received, with gratitude, with presence, with his own growing tenderness in return. All of it together was terrifying and beautiful, and exactly what she'd been searching for without knowing it. She was home. Chapter 15. The Day He Stopped Counting. There's a moment when time stops mattering, not because you're scared or lost, but because you've found something that doesn't require counting anymore. I can't point to the exact date. That's the whole thing. I stopped writing them down. We were walking through Central Pattaya Mall. Pafan wanted to stop at the phone shop. I wasn't thinking about content. I was just thinking about getting ice cream afterward. But I had the camera, the new DJI, and I realized, why not? She was doing her thing, being her, and the light was good through those big mall windows. I pressed record. No plan, no script, no idea that this would be the first video in what became 3 monetized Facebook pages and a YouTube channel crossing the monetization threshold at the exact moment I was just trying to get ice cream. The thing about not trying is that it works. Everyone wants to engineer virality. They think there's a formula. But the formula was just her being herself, us being us. No acting, no desperation in the frame. Just real life that people wanted to watch because real life had become so rare to see. That first video was innocent. It was dumb, actually. But people responded. A few hundred views became thousands. Then thousands became, well, I stopped counting those too. I called my mom one afternoon. I was sitting in the courtyard, and Pafan was inside getting us coffee. "Mom," I said, "I think I'm going to stay." She didn't ask why anymore. She already knew. Pause. I took the same principles from the wrap shop, the same ones from the marketing agency. But instead of selling wraps or client campaigns, I was selling something no one had asked me to sell. Us. Or not us. Her. The way she laughed. The way she moved. The way she made ordinary moments into moments people couldn't stop watching. But what I was really doing was showing the world what love looked like. Not performed love. Real love. The kind where she brought me coffee and cut my nails and touched my arm while talking to me. The kind where I touched her face gently when she was thinking about something. The kind where we existed in a frequency that most people had stopped believing in. The checks started coming. 3 Facebook pages, YouTube, then TikTok, then brand deals on Instagram, where she had 404,000 followers, and I had 35,000, which said everything about why this was working. I remember the first month we crossed $1,000, then 5,000, then the month it was 18,000. That wasn't from one platform. That was everything combined. Facebook revenue, YouTube revenue, sponsored posts, affiliate deals. The algorithm had looked at us and said, yes, more. And I realized we weren't just living. We were living off living. The dream wasn't just Thailand anymore. The dream was Thailand, where money came in and time stayed flexible, and the hardest decision of the day was what to eat. She would look at me when the deposits came through, not greedy, just wondering, is this real? This is real, I'd say. We're doing this. But I wasn't counting anymore. That was the thing. Success was no longer about numbers. Numbers were just what happened when you stopped trying to make them happen and started just being. That's when I knew I'd found something worth staying for. Pause. She'd bring me coffee in the mornings. I'd sit with the laptop open, watching analytics. 3 Facebook pages trending. The YouTube shorts going insane. Comments in languages I couldn't read from countries I couldn't spell. "How many today?" she'd ask, leaning over my shoulder. I'd tell her. She'd smile that smile. And then she'd ask what I wanted for lunch, because she'd already forgotten about the number the moment I said it. That was the real metric. We were making enough to stay, enough to stop working other jobs, enough to think about building something, a candle brand she'd been talking about, using that incredible sense for sense she had. A Thailand travel guide that was just her walking people through the places we loved. Not because we needed the money anymore. We didn't. But because creation was addictive, and she was a creator whether anyone was watching or not. The day he stopped counting, it wasn't the day we went viral. It wasn't the day the first check came. It was the day I realized I wasn't waiting for anything anymore. I was already here. I was already home. And home was generating enough momentum that it could carry itself. All I had to do was follow her around with a camera and let people see what I saw. That was more than enough. Chapter 16. The Conversation She Needed. The video was 4 minutes long. Me cutting his nails, hands and feet, the way I always do. Him sitting still, letting me work. That's my job. I've told him that 100 times. He tried to cut them himself once and I took the clippers right out of his hand. That's my job. Simple. Domestic. The kind of thing I do for him without thinking. Because I love him. Because taking care of him is how I breathe. The internet thought about it. Millions of views. I watched the number climb and didn't understand why anyone cared about nails. But they did. Comments flooded in at a speed I couldn't read them. Mike checked the phone one morning and went quiet. "What?" I asked. "Just read," he said. He handed it to me. Slavery. Abuse. How could I let him treat me like this? How could I be so broken that I thought this was love? Articles about relationships in Southeast Asia, with our thumbnail, next to examples of exploitation. I handed the phone back. I didn't want to read anymore. But it got worse. Or maybe it got better. I don't know the right word. Google's AI system had learned from all those millions of comments. The algorithm had been trained on the hate. When people searched my name, the algorithm was teaching itself that I was something worth hating, based solely on the frequency of that hate in the comments. Google doesn't even recognize you in your own photos anymore, Mike told me. He'd been trying to contact Google, trying to explain that an image recognition system shouldn't base its understanding of a person's identity on the volume of hateful comments directed at them. Thailand has anti-defamation laws. He looked into them. We could, he said carefully, but we'd have to care about it first. I didn't want to care about it. There was a doctor on Instagram. He'd show up in the comments with credentials attached to his hatred like it made it scientific. Like if a person with a medical degree called you a victim, that made it true. Mike made a video, not angry. He explained the 5 love languages, the book, the concept. He sat on the couch and talked about why he does things for me and why I do things for him, and how service isn't servitude when it's chosen. He made it for me. You don't have to read the comments, he said. I read them, but you don't have to. I don't want to, I said. I want to forget they exist. Then forget, he said. Whatever you do that makes you happy, do it. Don't do it for them. Do it for us. And if the comments are poison, I'll drink them so you don't have to. I cried then, not because of the hate, because of him, taking it so I didn't have to carry it. We kept posting. 40 million views a month across all platforms, thousands of comments easily, the YouTube shorts exploding, TikTok doing numbers I couldn't comprehend, and under all of it, the few comments that said, "This is goals. This is what I want." Those were the ones I looked for. Those were the ones that mattered. Pause. What I know about hate is this. It's loud, but it's not many. It's 100 people screaming louder than 10,000 people saying nothing. The people who loved us didn't always comment. They just watched. They just sent the videos to friends. They just lived their lives a little better because they saw us living ours. The doctor on Instagram became irrelevant. I didn't think about him. Mike stopped mentioning the Google AI issue after a while. There were bigger things. There was gold that needed mining from all this. Not from the hate, from the attention, the brands approaching, the audiences that had built themselves around our story, the opportunity to build something real, something lasting. Something that wasn't just us being us in a video, but us helping other people be themselves too. That's when the hate became noise. And noise, I learned, you can just stop listening to. Chapter 17. Something he'd never said. Japan was another world, not different from Thailand. Just another frame to look through. We were in Tokyo, the Shibuya crowd, the vending machines, the way Pafan looked at the neon signs like they were painting her face. We weren't there for content. We were there because I'd wanted to show her somewhere that wasn't Thailand, to prove that the world was bigger, or at least that I was curious enough to see if it was. Her phone buzzed. "It's Instagram," she said. She opened the DM, one of the biggest celebrities in the world, a person whose name is recognized in every country, a person whose life is lived behind gates and security. That person, sliding into her DMs like a regular human with a regular person to say hello to. She showed me immediately, first thing, before she even read it twice. "What does he want?" I asked. "I don't know. Just says he loves following our account." I smiled. Of course. It wasn't romantic. It was just fame recognizing the smaller gravity that was pulling at people's attention. One creator acknowledging another creator. One person who understood what it meant to be watched. Watching someone else who was beginning to understand. Later, Rick Ross reached out. Not in the same way. His energy was different. Business. He was about his money, his business, his hustle. He wasn't sliding into DMs to tell her she was cute. He was reaching out like a businessman recognizing another business person's hustle. I respected that. That was real. Pause. But in Japan, in that hotel room, I had the ring already. I'd had it for months. I'd bought it at a shop in Pattaya, just walking by, and I went in and I saw it, and I thought, that's the one. No engagement story, no production, just that's it. Buy it. It was in my bag the whole trip. I thought about the Shibuya crossing. I thought about a temple. I thought about making it a moment that was big enough for what I was feeling. But then I realized any moment big enough for this would be diminished by trying to make it big. The biggest thing that ever happened to me was just waking up next to her in Thailand. The biggest thing would just be asking her at home, in the courtyard, where we'd built a life that mattered. "Why didn't you do it in Japan?" she'd ask me later. "Because Japan wasn't ours. Home is ours," I'd say. And that was true. Japan was a place. Home was a decision. Every morning she chose it. Every night she chose to stay. Japan was beautiful, but Thailand was where she chose me. That was worth more than any backdrop. In Japan, we still couldn't keep our hands off each other. Walking through the streets, her arm linked through mine. In cafes, her head resting on my shoulder while we waited for coffee. On the train to Mount Fuji, she sat with her legs draped over mine, and I ran my fingers through her hair while she slept. One night in the hotel, she pulled out the nail clippers from her bag. She'd packed them. Of course she had. "Sit," she said, patting the bed, and there, in a hotel room in Tokyo, she took my hands and then my feet and did what she always does, what she loves to do. The ritual that was ours before the internet made it theirs. I watched her work, bent over my foot with that focused expression, and my hand was in my pocket, touching the ring box, thinking, this woman packed nail clippers for a trip to Japan because taking care of me is how she breathes. We stole kisses on quiet streets, in a garden, against a temple wall, the kind of kisses that said, "I'm still here, I'm still choosing you, this is still real." I'd touch her face. She'd touch my chest. We'd look at each other like we were trying to memorize the moment, even though we had all the time in the world. Every other girl would have folded under what we'd been through, the hate comments, the fake narratives, the people who decided our story before they even understood it. But she didn't fold. She just stopped listening. She made the 5 love languages video with me about something deeper than the hate could touch. She kept creating. She kept laughing. She kept choosing. That's when I knew, yes, this is it. This is the person. This is the one. Pause. We came back from Japan. The ring sat in my pocket for a few more weeks. I wasn't waiting for the right moment. I was just living, the way we always do, until the moment happened, because all moments were the right moment when she was in them. She gave me all her passwords voluntarily, every account, every email. She said, "You should know everything." I said, "I already do." And that was true. I had no secrets from her. She had no secrets from me. The transparency wasn't something we negotiated. It was just what happened when you decided that honesty was the foundation. She didn't keep things from me, not out of weakness, out of choice. She chose to be seen. She chose to be known. She chose me knowing everything she was. That's when I knew I had something worth protecting. Not because she was weak, because she was strong enough to let someone else carry some of the weight. Chapter 18. What She Chose. Chiang Mai was cold. I'd never felt cold like that before. Pattaya is always warm. Pattaya is always wet. But Chiang Mai in the mountains, it was 60 degrees, and the air was clean, and I could see stars that I'd never seen in Pattaya. Mike had rented a villa. Not fancy, simple. There was an outdoor kitchen, and we made cup noodles at night and sat under the hibiscus flowers that hung like lanterns over the courtyard. "I like it here," I told him. He smiled. He already knew. Chiang Mai is more my place than Pattaya is. Pattaya is where we live, but Chiang Mai feels like home in a different way. It's slower. The people move slower. Time moves slower. There's a village feeling even though it's a city. You can go to cafes by waterfalls and rivers, and it feels like you're not in the world anymore, just in one small corner of it that someone put there for you to find. Mike prefers Pattaya. He likes the beach and the energy and the way the city never stops. But he brought me to Chiang Mai anyway. He always brings me to the places I need to see, not the places he needs to see. Pause. We took motorbike rides through the mountains, just riding, no destination. Finding roads that didn't have names and places that didn't have tourists. I'd hold on to him and feel the wind and think, this is what freedom feels like. He taught me to play golf. I didn't want to. It's slow, I said. There's too much walking. But he bought me clubs, nice ones, and he took me to the course, and he showed me how to swing, and suddenly I was obsessed. It became our thing. Every few days we'd go, and I'd hit bad shots, and he'd laugh, and I'd get mad, and we'd both be happy. That's what life with him is. He takes things I think I won't like and makes them into things I can't live without. He'd introduce me to olives. I didn't understand. They're salty and weird, I said. Try the good ones, he said. He got me smoked Gouda from the import section. Now I eat them like they're treasure. I introduced him to real Thai food, not the tourist version, the real thing. The pad kra pao my mom makes, the spicy som tam that makes your eyes water. He eats it without complaint, even though I know it burns his mouth, and he acts like it doesn't. Thai food is going to destroy my stomach, he told me once. Your stomach will thank you, I said. And now he can't eat anything else. In Chiang Mai, he'd wake in the morning and bring me coffee in bed. I'd sit up and he'd hand it to me, kissing my forehead before sitting beside me. We'd drink it in silence, his hand resting on my thigh. We'd walk through the night market with his arm around my shoulders. I'd point at things and he'd buy them without hesitation, not because we needed them, because I wanted them. That's what love looked like. A man who paid attention to what I wanted and made it happen. When I was cold at night, he'd wrap himself around me. His body became my warmth. I'd press back against him, and he'd tighten his hold. We'd sleep like that, tangled together, unable to tell where one of us ended and the other began. Pause. In Japan, when he was thinking about proposing, I didn't know. But even if I had, if he'd asked me right there in the neon and the crowds, I would have said yes. I would have said yes in the Shibuya crossing. I would have said yes at a McDonald's. I would have said yes in the mountains under the stars where we are now, with the hibiscus flowers and the cold air, and nothing but him and the moment. The place didn't matter. The production didn't matter. I was already married to him in every way that mattered. The ring was just going to make it official in the eyes of other people. What I chose was him, every single day. The way he listens when I talk, the way he doesn't try to fix things, just sits with me when I'm sad, the way he protects me without making me feel weak, the way he provides without making it feel like I owe him anything. He teaches me, he learns from me, he chooses me, and I choose him back over and over in every moment that could have gone a different way, but didn't, because I said yes. Are you happy? He asks sometimes. Every day, I tell him. I'm happy every single day. And I mean it, not because it's easy, because it's him, because life with him, even when it's hard, even when the comments are hateful, even when the pressure is intense, is better than any other choice I could have made. Chapter 19. Staying. I asked her at home. No cameras, no production, just the courtyard and the evening and the moment when it felt right, because every moment with her feels right. I got down on one knee and I asked her to marry me, and she said yes before I even finished the question. She said yes so fast, it was like she'd been waiting for me to catch up to where she already was. When she said yes, she didn't just say it with words. She pulled me up and kissed me with everything she had. Her hands went to my face. She kissed me like she was trying to prove something, like she was so full of yes that words couldn't contain it. I held her and lifted her off the ground, spinning her around. When I set her down, she was laughing and crying at the same time. "I love you," she said. "I love you so much." "I love you too," I said. And I slipped the ring on her finger. It fit perfectly. I called my mom. She said yes, I told her. Of course she did. I knew she would, my mom said. Like it was obvious. Like there was never any doubt. I guess there wasn't. We started planning a traditional Thai wedding, coordinating families, learning about ceremonies. Pafan was already talking about her dress, about the colors, about how it would happen here, in Thailand, where she was from and where I'd chosen to stay. That was the real commitment, not the ring. The ring was just jewelry. The commitment was choosing to build a life here, in her country, with her people, in a place that every person back home had warned me about. Pause. The social media empire had become real. 40 million views a month. That wasn't a coincidence. That was the major part being her. Her personality, her look, her smile, the way the camera loves her because the camera is just showing what's already there. I applied the same principles from the wrap shop, the same marketing knowledge from the agency. But the difference was that I wasn't selling a product. I was selling attention. And the attention came not because I knew how to build funnels, but because Pafan was infinitely worth looking at. 3 Facebook pages monetized, YouTube crossing the threshold, TikTok already doing numbers that surprised me when I checked, Instagram brand deals. The best month was $18,000, not from one source, from all of them combined, working in tandem, building momentum together. And the crazy part? We weren't even trying anymore. We were just living. We'd wake up at 9 or 10. We'd spend an hour deciding what to eat. That was the hardest part of the day. Then pad krapow again, because she'd already made it that week, and I'd already eaten it twice, but it was still better than anything else. Go-karts, golf with her new clubs, motorbike rides discovering roads that didn't have names yet. We'd film sometimes, but mostly we just lived. We did things without the camera, and those things were real. And sometimes the real things were better than the ones we filmed. When she'd cook, I'd sit in the kitchen and watch. She'd hum while she worked. She'd occasionally look over at me and smile. When the food was ready, she'd serve me first, making sure my portion was large enough. She'd sit down and watch me eat, her hand on my knee. I'd reach over and touch her face, pull her close for a kiss. She'd lean into me, her hand coming to rest on my chest. I'm going to do this for the rest of my life, I'd tell her. Do what? Love you. Wake up next to you. Choose you. She'd smile that smile. Good, she'd say, because I'm never letting you go. That was the secret they all wanted to know. There was no secret, just real married to purpose, real married to attention, real married to money, but money that felt like it came from somewhere honest. Pause. The whole life cost $3,000 to $4,000 a month. That was rent, that was food, that was gas for the motorbike, that was golf clubs and brand partnerships and everything. 3,000 or 4,000. And we were making 18 on good months. That meant we were living in freedom that people back home couldn't fathom. You went to Thailand because you were a loser, the narrative said. The broke American story. The guy who couldn't make it and ran away. But I had money. I had options. I chose her. I chose this life. I chose this country. I could have lived anywhere. I could have done anything. Instead, I chose to sit in a courtyard in Pattaya with a woman who cuts my nails and films it, and somehow that footage helps us pay the rent. She had her own money. She had land. Her family had means. We weren't some savior narrative. We were two people with real options choosing to build something real together. We pooled everything. No keeping score. No his money and her money. Just ours. Just one account, one life, one future. The candle brand was coming. She had this incredible sense for scents, the way other people have perfect pitch in music. She could smell something once and recreate it. She could smell a room and know exactly what it needed. A candle brand with her name on it made sense. It was coming. We had a Thailand travel guide in digital product form, just her showing people the places we loved, the waterfalls and the cafes and the roads that didn't have names. That was coming too. But the big thing, the thing that mattered, was that we didn't need them to come. We were already complete. The money was already enough. The life was already built. Everything else was just extra, just layers on top of something that was already solid. That's the thing about staying. It stops being a decision and starts being a reality. You wake up and you're already home. And home looks like her, making pad krapao, asking what you want to do today, holding your hand on a motorbike through mountains you never knew existed until you came looking for them with her. I stayed because I had to. I had to stay because anywhere else would have been wrong. She was right, and right was worth everything. Chapter 20. What she knew. I have 404,000 followers on Instagram. Mike has 35,000. Everyone always laughs about that. But it makes sense. People follow me to see me. They follow him to see me with him. The math is simple. The major part of why we grow so fast is me. That's not me being conceited. That's me being honest. My personality, my look, my smile, the way the camera catches something in my face that people want to watch. Mike understands this. He never pretended otherwise. What I know is that he took those principles from his businesses and he applied them to us. He understood marketing. He understood momentum. He understood how to build something that compounds. But even with all that knowledge, none of it would have mattered if people didn't want to watch. And they want to watch because of me. That's not sad. That's just real. Pause. When men try to get close to me, I move behind Mike. I noticed the podcast host noticing this, the way I extended my hand for a handshake instead of a hug. Just the handshake, just formal and respectful. I don't hug men who aren't family. I don't look at other guys. I don't create the opportunity for anyone to misunderstand where my loyalty is. That's not weakness. That's choice. I choose to be clear. I choose to make it impossible for someone to think I'm available when I'm not. When you're married, you act married. When you're committed, you act committed. That's what every relationship needs that doesn't have it. People acting like they mean what they say. Mike calls me the protector and provider. I heard him say it once, and I smiled because he was describing himself. He protects, he provides, but I wanted him to know that I do those things too, that marriage isn't about one person being strong and one person being weak. It's about two people being strong in different ways, complementing each other. I didn't choose him because I was broken and he was my savior. I chose him because he matched my strength, because I could be myself completely, and he would still choose me every single time. Pause. There's an 80-20 rule in relationships. I read about it. One person gives 80% and one person gives 20%, and it balances out. Some people say that's healthy. Some people say it's codependent. But I've learned that real partnership is 100 divided 100. You both give everything. You both show up completely. There's no keeping track, no scoreboard, no measuring who did more. We give 100 and 100 and it works. What he needed to know was that I was choosing him every single day. Not because I was trapped, not because I didn't have options, but because he was the best option. Because life with him was richer than any other life I could build. My advice to anyone who would listen: be honest. Whatever is past is past. Fix the problem before you go to sleep. Don't let it sit there, growing roots, poisoning the next day. Talk about it. Work through it. Come back to each other at night knowing you're on the same team. Make each other happy. That's the whole thing. Not make yourself happy and hope they join you. Make each other happy. Be concerned with their joy. Be delighted by their success. Be moved by their pain. That's the whole thing. Mike asked me once, what if I had never come to Thailand? I told him, then I would have been waiting for you. And I meant it. I know that sounds like something from a movie, but it's true. I knew him before I knew him. I was waiting for someone who understood that love wasn't about fitting into each other's lives. It was about building a new life together that neither of us would have built alone. He found me at exactly the right time, or maybe I found him. Or maybe we found each other in a way that has nothing to do with time and everything to do with destiny, if that's a thing. What I know is, I chose him every day, and I'll keep choosing him. And that choice, that's what makes everything else possible. Epilogue. Where the story continues. I came to Thailand to document their story. That's what I told myself. That's what I told them. But really I came because I wanted to see if it was real. If a love story in the age of social media and cameras and content could still be genuine. It is. I'm here to tell you it is. It was June 2025 when Mike's mother arrived. She'd been the one who introduced her son to Thai food as a child in Kansas. Some passing interest in a restaurant, a seed planted that would take decades to grow. She never could have known that seed would land him in Thailand, in a courtyard, in a life built with a woman she'd never met. Watching them meet was watching a story come full circle. Mike's mother held Pafan's hand. Pafan bowed with respect, the traditional greeting, and Mike's mother understood that she was being welcomed not just to Thailand, but into a family that was being built across continents and cultures, and everything that separates us. They went to see elephants together, not the tourist version, the real sanctuaries where the animals are treated with dignity. Pafan moved between her mother-in-law and the elephants with a grace that suggested she'd been doing this forever. Or maybe that she did everything with that grace. Pause. They went shopping. 3 women moving through the markets of Thailand, one from Kansas who'd planted a seed that grew into a life. 2 women on opposite sides of the world who'd found each other through that seed. Mike followed, filming sometimes, mostly just watching, mostly just witnessing his mother witness his life. They ate meals together, Thai food that Pafan had taught Mike to love, that his mother had first introduced him to decades earlier, coming back around like a circle completing itself. Stories being shared, laughter happening in the way it does when you suddenly realize you love someone, even though you just met them. What struck me most was how unsurprised Mike's mother was. I always knew, she told me, he'd find his way to something real, something honest. And that's what they have. 40 million views a month, $18,000 months from brand deals and monetized platforms, 3 Facebook pages, YouTube channel, TikTok presence. But underneath all of that, under all of the numbers and the algorithms and the attention, is something simple. They chose each other. Every day, they chose to wake up and make pad kra pao and go-karts and motorbike rides through mountains. They chose to build a life that mattered to them. And the world watched, because real matters. Pafan asked me once, "Why are you writing this? Why does our story matter?" I told her, "Because you're showing people that love isn't broken. It's not transactional. It's not a lie we tell ourselves. It's real. You and Mike, you're proof that it's real." She smiled that smile, the one that has 400,000 people on Instagram watching for it, the one that landed Mike in Thailand and gave him a life he never knew to ask for. 15 months together, as of April 4th, 2026. They're planning a traditional Thai wedding. They're building a candle brand. They're creating a Thailand travel guide. They're living in what most people would call paradise, but what they call home. Because paradise implies it's not permanent. Home implies you're staying, and they're staying. Pause. This is their story, and it's real. The pad kra pao is real. The grass in the courtyard is real. The grass beneath their feet when they walk the golf course is real. The choice to wake up and choose each other again, that's real. The world told them a story about who they were supposed to be. The world said, American loser goes to Thailand for easy love. The world said, Thai woman serves American man. The world said, this is exploitation. The world said, This is slavery. And then the world watched. 40 million views a month watching. Because the real story was so much better than the narrative. Because real love, honest, choosing, daily, unglamorous love, is the most rare and most precious thing a person can witness. Mike applied marketing principles to social media. Pafan applied her personality and her beauty and her character. Together they built something that feeds them, that houses them, that lets them wake up every day in a place they choose. But the real thing, the thing that mattered, was that they'd have done it without the cameras. They'd have chosen each other in a world with no one watching, in a life with no followers, in a story that no one would ever tell. That's how I knew it was real. That's how I knew this story was worth telling.